From
Recording in
Texas.
progress.
And so the message is the irony of searching for wisdom.
Good morning, folks. It's good to see y'all. I'm preaching today from Tampa, Florida. We lost power Monday morning in the hurricane, early Monday morning, and where I live didn't get it back until Saturday evening. So we were planning to come down to Florida here for a vacation sometime soon anyway. So we decided to move it up. So we've been down here about 3 days. I apologize for my sound. I wasn't able to bring my microphone. I had to choose between my microphone and my kids, and I chose to bring my kids instead. So I'm going to share my screen with you here. We're going to talk about wisdom today, and I want to talk about a theme in wisdom, an idea in wisdom that is a bit of a contradiction. It's an ironic combination of two things in wisdom literature that was never pointed out to me. It's something I kind of noticed as I was studying wisdom literature and some of the stuff in Proverbs, and it took me a while to sort of figure out how these two ideas can be combined. So we're going to talk today about the irony of searching for wisdom. The irony of searching for wisdom. All right. So before we get into it, though, we've talked about wisdom and the irony in wisdom. I need to give a little bit of background to you folks to make sure everybody's up to speed on what we're talking about when we talk about wisdom. Now, in the Old Testament, there's a section called wisdom literature. Now, the Old Testament itself doesn't call it wisdom literature. This is something that scholars call it. Scholars have a way, and Christians in general, have a way of breaking up the Bible into different categories. For instance, in the New Testament, you have the four Gospels, and you also have the epistles, the letters that we get from the apostles like Paul and others. In the Old Testament, we have other sections. We have prophetic sections, stuff like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, and Joel. We have historical books like Kings. We have the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. But then we also have wisdom literature. And wisdom literature is usually said to be made up of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. Now, sometimes folks will maybe throw one other book in there or so, but these are the main 3 books that are called wisdom literature or wisdom books. Now, they're called wisdom books because they focus on the idea and the theme of wisdom far more than any other book in the Bible. Now, you can find the word wisdom outside of these 3 books. Occasionally, you'll see the Apostle Paul write about Christ being the wisdom of God. Jesus will talk about wisdom. Isaiah will talk about wisdom. So it gets brought up. But these 3 books are so focused on the theme of wisdom that they're known as wisdom books or wisdom literature. But when we talk about wisdom literature or the wisdom books, we've got to sort of define what the word wisdom means. What do we mean by the word wisdom? And I want to show you I want to show you a collection of terms, of synonyms, really, for the idea of wisdom. And let's see if we can sort of build a definition of what wisdom is. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to define. I think we all know that we've met people who are intelligent, but would say not really that wise. And we've met people who maybe aren't book smart, but have a lot of wisdom. So let's see what Proverbs has to say. When it describes wisdom, it puts a lot of other synonyms, a lot of other terms and ideas around wisdom that help us define it. Now, this comes from the introduction to the book of Proverbs. And if you're going to find anything like a definition of wisdom, you would expect it to come in the purpose statement for the book of Proverbs. And that's what we have here. It's introducing Proverbs. It says the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. And then it gives the purpose statement. Why does the book of Proverbs exist? And it says this, for gaining wisdom. Well, there's our word. And it's put first because wisdom comes up over and over again in the book of Proverbs. And it's focused on wisdom to such an extent that it's like the wisdom book par excellence. But notice again what it says here, and I've got some words underlined for you, and I want you to notice these words because they're all synonyms for wisdom. They all help us define what wisdom is in the book of Proverbs. So for gaining wisdom and instruction, so being a wise person has something to do with gaining instruction. To gain wisdom overlaps a lot with gaining instruction. So it has something to do with learning, right? For understanding, words of insight. So wisdom has something to do with instruction, has something to do with understanding, has something to do with insight. Insight, is when you kind of grasp, you can see into insight. You can see into a situation and understand it. The next line says, for receiving instruction, there's our word again, in prudent behavior. Whether I didn't underline the word prudent, but we could. Doing what is right and just and fair. For giving prudence, notice that word, to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion. Well, those are two new words we haven't covered yet, to the young. So wisdom has something to do with prudence, which is not a word that we use a lot nowadays. But it also has something to do with knowledge and discretion. Now, we know what knowledge is. Discretion is when you understand what to do in a given situation. It's a little different from knowledge. It's maybe a subset of knowledge. Look at the next line. Let the wise listen, there's our word, and add to their learning. So wisdom has something to do with learning. And let the discerning get guidance. Now, this kind of feeds into some of the themes and terms we've already covered. Discernment is when you can look at a situation and come away with a judgment. What should I do in this situation? Discernment is not simply understanding 2 + 2 is 4. It has something deeper than that. It's something about reading a situation, reading a context, a complex context in which you have to make a decision and coming to the right one. Discerning and get guidance. Now, there's our word again. We saw that word up, something similar up there in the word for instruction. So wisdom has something to do with being guided or getting instruction. Now, that can come in various ways, but just I think we understand at this point, wisdom has something to do with our intelligence, but it has something to do with our intelligence in specific situations. And then the last line is for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. So again, understanding and wisdom. Now, these are some of the words that are paralleled with wisdom, but in the same context, they help us define it. And when we look words up in a dictionary, what we see are other words, and we have to put a bunch of other words together to define one word. Usually, it's not a picture; it's other words. So, if we want to define wisdom, the words around it that help us define it are words like instruction, understanding, prudence, knowledge, discretion, learning, discerning, and guidance. These are all the sort of the larger field of words that are associated and attached to the word wisdom. So to be wise is, in some sense, to be smart. That's why we talk about learning. It talks about guidance. It talks about understanding, discernment, things like that. So to be wise is at least to be smart in some way. But I want you to look back again, and we sort of saw this already in some of the terms, like discernment. But look again at the second line here. That sort of points us to the core of wisdom and how it's different from simply being smart. For receiving instruction in what? In prudent behavior. That is, wisdom is not just instruction, it's not just understanding, it's not just ideas. It's ideas for right behavior, for smart behavior. That's what prudent means. Prudent means you look at a situation and you come up with the right decision. So wisdom has something to do with making smart decisions in difficult situations. And notice what the second half of this line says, doing what is right and just and fair. So wisdom is not simply about an intellectual understanding. This is not something you can get just in a classroom. You can't simply watch a video on this or a course on this or read a book on this and then you've got it. It's not that kind of smartness. It's being smart, but it's smart behavior and smart doing. So we could call wisdom smart action. To be a wise person is a person who takes smart action. It's not a word we hear very much, but I'm trying to make it crisp for us. You could also put it like this: to be wise is to be skilled. So to be wise in something is to be skilled in that area. It doesn't mean that you know everything, doesn't mean that you're a genius, doesn't mean you have exhaustive knowledge in everything. You could, in fact, according to Proverbs, you could be wise in one area and a fool in another. You can be wise with your money, but a fool with relationships. You can be wise with your work ethic, but be a fool with maybe how you treat your body and how you sleep. So there's a wisdom is not simply about understanding. It's about understanding how to apply information to situations and make the right decision. And that we could call a skill. So to be wise is to be skilled in a specific area. Mark Twain has a really interesting a quote on this. And again, this is not biblical, but I think it gets to sort of the heart of the biblical idea. He said, knowledge becomes wisdom only after it has been put to good use. Meaning you can understand information and facts from a book or from a person telling you that. That's one thing. That's one level of understanding. But then how you take that information and you apply it to a completely different area. You apply it to something that's not in a classroom, something that's in real life, and you do it on your own. Well, that's when you know you've got wisdom. That's when you have skill to apply information to specific situations. That's what wisdom is. That's what Proverbs is about. That's what the wisdom literature in the Bible is about. But here's the thing. Because wisdom is a type of skill, it's an applied knowledge, we can improve it. We can improve our grasp of wisdom. We can improve our skills in learning over time. That it's not just understanding a specific type of math or a specific type of chemistry. It's being able to take your understanding of math, or let's just say your understanding of finance. That might be something more relevant for some of us. Your understanding of accounting and finance and math, and apply it to your own economic situation. Can you pay your bills with this type of job? How do I save money when I make this much money? What's my car payment going to be? What's my house payment going to be? How much am I going to spend on food? That's an application of financial knowledge to your own personal life. And you can get better at that. In fact, most people do. Most people start out in life simple. And that's what Proverbs says about children, about young people in general, that they're sort of simple-minded. Not that they're not smart. Children are incredibly smart. They simply don't have the experience yet. They haven't gone through enough repetitions where they know how to apply the knowledge that they're learning. And so they make mistakes. And from those mistakes comes wisdom. They learn, oh, in this situation, I should have said this. In this situation, I should have done that. So it's a skill that we can improve. And again, if you look at the book of Proverbs, when Proverbs talks about wisdom and it talks about a wise person, it rarely talks about pure intelligence, sort of theoretical intelligence. It's typically talking about applied intelligence, such as marital relationships, husband and wife. Proverbs has a lot to say about that. Remember Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman? That's an area of wisdom. She's a wise woman. Look what she does. Don't know what her IQ is, but we know what she does. So she's wise. Proverbs has a lot to say about fathers and mothers and children and how they treat one another. In fact, that's how Proverbs starts out. It starts out as a father speaking to the child to learn wisdom. So Proverbs, when it talks about wisdom and it talks about a skill, let's be very specific. It's talking about relationships in our families and in our friendships. Proverbs talks about how you treat your friends, what you need to do not to offend them. It talks about how to treat your enemies. Proverbs talks about debt, talks about working hard, saving money. It talks about sleep and rest, but not too much so that you become a sluggard. So Proverbs has all of these areas that it covers and usually does it in these short little pithy statements where it'll sum up kind of an idea in a little statement, a very short statement called a proverb. And it's meant to remind you of how to apply knowledge to specific situations. All right, so Proverbs teaches us a lot about this applied knowledge, the skill, and tells us we can improve in it. And in fact, if you notice, The whole book of Proverbs is there to help you improve your skill for living. It is built to help you improve and grow in knowledge and in wisdom. And that's what it says at the very beginning, for gaining wisdom and understanding, right? So it's something we can improve in. So the book of Proverbs encourages us to grow in wisdom. But here's my point for today. It does it in seemingly contradictory ways. This is, if people are always looking for contradictions in the Bible. And most of the contradictions they point out are really not contradictions. This is one no one's ever pointed out to me. I think I have a solution for it today, but I want to show it to you and see what you think. So it encourages us to grow in wisdom. It encourages us to develop wisdom, but the way it does it seems to contradict itself. I want you to look at this. So first, Proverbs tells us that we must seek wisdom intensely if we're going to find it. In other words, this is not going to be an easy pursuit. If you're going to get wisdom, if you're going to grow in understanding, if you're going to develop skills for life, you're going to really have to invest yourself. You're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to try hard. Look at what it says. Proverbs 2. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. See how it's encouraging the reader to do something, to seek wisdom. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, notice the escalation there. If you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure. Like, we're getting stronger and stronger as we move through this passage. It starts with accept my words. Well, that's kind of easy. You accept your mail. You don't have to go anywhere to accept it. It comes to you. You accept it. Somebody gives you something, you accept it. He says, store up my commands. Well, that just means you kind of don't throw it away. You put it up somewhere. That's what you do with your food when you bring it home from the grocery store. You put it up in the cupboard. You store it up. Right? You store up that soup can until it expires and you never really ate it. But, it was a good idea. So you accept, you store up. These are sort of passive. Notice how it begins to build and escalate, though. You turn your ear to wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. That seems like the person is investing more of themselves than simply accepting. And then it builds, it gets even stronger. In the third sort of section, it says, call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding. Now, this goes beyond simply receiving. It goes beyond simply turning your ear. Now you're shouting for wisdom. Now, when's the last time you called out for something? Probably it was either a friend, family member, or maybe a pet. I have to call out for my dog sometimes. They get off leash. It happened here. We were in Florida back in the spring, and one of my dogs got off leash and ran and jumped in the pond to chase some ducks. Well, the problem with that is there are multiple alligators that live in this pond behind the house where I'm staying at right now. One of them's about 10 feet long. Saw it yesterday. So me and my kids, you could say, were crying aloud for our dog to get out of the water before she became a snack for the alligators. We were screaming at her to get out. Now, maybe you haven't screamed lately, but my guess is if you've been in the store, couldn't find the person you're looking for, or maybe at home, you're shouting for somebody, hey, come here, look at this. Maybe it's something on the news. Maybe you just need to find them. You're calling it out, you're shouting. There's a more intense pursuit there. But notice the fourth stanza here, and this is where it goes over the top. It's not just that you accept wisdom. It's not that you store it up. It's not just you turn your ear toward it. It's not just that you cry out for it. Now you look for it like silver and search for it for hidden treasure. Now, I've never been on a treasure hunt. Well, not really, Easter egg hunts. But treasure hunting is actually sort of making a comeback, if you've noticed. There's people who do this, YouTube channels, and this is what they do. They just go out and they look for treasure, people losing stuff at the beach or in rivers. They have what is it called now? Some of you guys know, the magnets, where they throw those magnets in, and big, huge magnets, and they pull up stuff out of creeks and rivers and lakes. It's amazing what people have found. But there's also professionals doing this now, where they're locating sunken ships from the 17 and 1800s that are loaded with gold, and they're looking for them. There are people, this is their job. They just search. They go over with all kinds of sensitive equipment, radars and stuff, sonars, to look down into the ocean to try to find this stuff. Then they dive deep down, sometimes under dangerous conditions, to look for this treasure. It's a life calling, and it's intense. And you have to kind of leave everything else to go do this. Remind you that parable Jesus gave about giving up everything for the treasure. You sort of have to do that if you're going to be a treasure hunter. You've got to really seek for it. You got to invest yourself. This is not just receiving and storing up. This is going out and pursuing and searching and crying for it. So that's how Proverbs talks about wisdom. If you're going to be wise, Proverbs says, you're going to have to go, you're going to have to be a treasure hunter. You're going to have to dedicate yourself to this. You're going to have to go through the embarrassment of raising your voice, not literally, but in the sense that you're animated, you're eager, you're intensely searching for it to the point that you're willing to shout for it. So this is how it describes it. So Proverbs says we must seek for wisdom, we must accept, turn our ear, cry aloud, and search for it like silver or like treasure. It's a pretty intense search. But also, and this is where the contradiction comes in, Proverbs tells us that wisdom is seeking us. Now, notice how Proverbs talks here. Proverbs 1 says, out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. And then notice the pronoun that's used. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. Now, this is interesting. What Proverbs does, and if you've read Proverbs, you've seen this, it pictures wisdom itself as if it were a woman. There may be various reasons why it chose a woman, but Proverbs is written to young men who are marriageable age, who are going to be going out and finding a wife soon. So these typical, this age group, they're kind of interested in finding a woman for their life. Proverbs pitches wisdom itself as a woman. You need to seek a woman like this, namely wisdom. You need to seek it. And so it presents it as a woman, and it personifies wisdom as if it were a lady who's out in the streets calling for people. Scholars call it Lady Wisdom in this poem we find in Proverbs 1, but it runs throughout the book. And interestingly enough, Proverbs has really three women. It has Lady Wisdom, the beginning of the book. Then it talks about Lady Folly, or a woman who is so foolish. And the foolishness is moral decisions. It's the adulterous woman who's out actively searching for a foolish man who will commit adultery with her. And Proverbs gives a very long poem on that. And then at the end of the book, we get another long poem about a woman who's going out doing things, and it's the woman of Proverbs 31. So in that sense, Proverbs seems to, at the very end, it seems to blend the idea of Lady Wisdom as an abstract concept that's personified as a woman with these young men who are going to be actually choosing a wife. Kind of blends those two things together at the end of Proverbs. It's interesting, fascinating discussion. But notice where this woman, Proverbs, who's not really a woman, it's the idea of wisdom, but it's personified as a woman. It's given human characteristics. Notice what she is doing. She calls aloud. She raises her voice. Well, this is just what we saw Proverbs is telling us to do. Proverbs told us to shout, to cry aloud, to go out and seek for wisdom. Now it's telling us that wisdom is shouting aloud and calling out for us. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. So we're supposed to be calling out for wisdom. Wisdom is calling out for us. It's like two people trying to find each other, shouting at each other. Where are you at? It's like if you've ever been lost in the woods, or maybe one of those corn mazes. I've done that just a few times in my life. You get out and you're in a maze and you can't see the person, you can hear them, you're shouting out, you're calling for someone. That's what Proverbs is describing here. Wisdom is calling out, she's crying out. And notice the verbs that are used here. And this is what I just pointed out. She calls aloud, she raises her voice, she cries out, she makes her speech. Notice where she does it, though. It says she does it on the walls. This is a wall of Jerusalem here. Look at how high this wall would be. Imagine someone standing on that wall shouting down to the crowd. They would hear her voice. Now, I don't know if you can hear every word, but one thing's for sure, you would know she's up there. You would know that she's shouting. You would be able to understand some of what she's saying, at least, if not everything, because of the acoustics. She would be getting your attention. If there's a person standing up there, if there's a woman standing up there shouting down to that crowd, she would definitely get their attention. And this is the city gate. This is actually one in Jerusalem, I think. It's a busy place. It's not just a door that people walk through. It's the centerpiece of the city where everybody comes through. And wisdom is said to be in those places. She's on the walls, she's shouting, she's raising her voice, she's crying out, she's making her speech. That's what wisdom does. But notice again, we must seek for wisdom. The only way we're going to find it is if we accept it, turn our ear toward it, cry aloud and search for it like treasure. At the same time that wisdom is doing that for us. And you have to ask yourself why, if Proverbs is telling us wisdom is like buried treasure, then why does it also tell us that wisdom is like a woman shouting from a wall, looking for us? Seems like it can't both be true. That's sort of the ironic contradiction that I noticed as I looked through that. But then as I began to ponder this, how can both of these be true? I noticed there's probably a couple of good reasons. One is this: because growing in wisdom takes practice. It's complicated to develop skills for making wise decisions. It's not an easy thing so that you're just simply found. Wisdom finds you, you find wisdom, and you're done. It's an ongoing, lifelong process of developing skill. Think, for instance, of when you've tried to learn something complicated. Now, maybe that was math for you. Maybe it was calculus. Maybe it was algebra. Maybe it was another language. Most of us in the worship service this morning know 2 languages or more. Especially if you're an adult and you try to learn a foreign language as an adult, even as a teenager, you're in a classroom, it's a very complicated process. It takes a lot of work. Any difficult subject that you're going to learn takes a lot of work. I started a new job recently. They told me when I started the job, it's going to take you 3 years to really master this job. And I thought, 3 years? I'm in that job right now. It's taking a long time. It's a very complicated field to be in. And what I've noticed about my job, complicated jobs, about complicated subjects in classrooms, whether it be math or language or something else like that, is that what you need in order to develop the skill slowly over time, what you need are 2 things. You need a very smart teacher who really works hard to keep your attention and to apply things. A teacher who seems like they really don't care to have your attention or not. A teacher who seems like they're just going to dump this information out there. If you get it, fine. If you don't, fine. Is going to end up failing a big part of the class, especially if it's a complicated subject. What you need is a teacher who's aggressive, when you look confused, they go find you. They come around the room and they constantly ask, do you understand this topic? Do you understand this problem? Let me look and see how you've done it. That's a good teacher. That's a wise teacher. But it's not enough just to have a wise teacher in the classroom with you if you're learning something complicated. You also have to have something else. And what is it? You have to have an eagerness, a zeal for learning. Your teacher has to call out to you when they see you confused. You have to call out to your teacher when you are confused. To learn something, wisdom has to get your attention. And for you to learn it, you have to aggressively be seeking information from wisdom. You have to be constantly looking at it, searching for it. Now, it's right there in front of you. If you're, think about the difficult topics you've studied. Maybe it was, again, math or language or some other topic, chemistry, something like that. That's hard, something that's hard for you. What you had to do is you had to have a teacher right there, but that wasn't enough. You had to try really hard, but guess what? That wasn't enough. You didn't have to try hard just 1 hour or 1 day. You had to try hard over and over and over again to develop that skill. And when you failed, your teacher had to point out your mistakes. And you keep applying yourself. So one of the reasons I think Proverbs describes this in what seems like to us initially a contradictory way. Wait, is wisdom seeking us or do we seek wisdom? I thought it was like hidden treasure, but here she's on the city wall. It's because the learning process itself, for anything complicated, the learning process takes time. And it takes a good teacher and an eager learner. Both have to be there for it to take place. But I think there's another reason why Proverbs tells us that we really have to be eager and crying out for wisdom. And it's because we naturally love foolishness and hate wisdom. We naturally love foolishness and hate wisdom. That's the human condition. We hate wisdom not because we know it's wisdom. We hate it because it's not our ideas. To develop wisdom, you will, to a certain extent, have to throw out your own ideas, your preconceived notions, the things that you think are right. And this happens to us all the time. It happens in politics and in business. It happens everywhere. People get this idea, I think this will work. This type of business idea, this can't fail. And people pour millions of dollars into it, and it fails. We have an idea, I think this is going to work just like this. And we try it, and it fails. It blows up in our face. And we have a decision to make at that point. Are we going to humble ourselves? Are we going to seek to grow, to learn, to develop a skill? We're going to listen to wisdom shouting to us from the wall. Are we going to seek it out and find it? Or are we going to be content with our own foolishness? And most of the time, our initial inclination, because of our pride, is to love our foolishness and hate wisdom. Look at what Proverbs says. Let's read this passage again. We already read part of it. I want to start at the beginning. She's out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. She's in a crowded place. She's not in some secret room. Wisdom is out there all the time. And in our life, the wise thing to do is right in front of us most of the time. We don't see it until afterwards. We say hindsight is 2020. And that means after we've failed in something, we look back and we're like, gosh, it was such an easy answer and I chose the wrong one. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. But notice what she says to us. She's shouting to us. And notice what she says. How long will you who are simple? This is sometimes a person's called simple. Some certain cultures call that, and it means they're, easy person to get along with. That's not what simple means here. It's simple-minded. It's someone who doesn't have wisdom. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? And that's us. We love our simplicity, our bad simplicity, the simplicity that tells us that sin's okay. We can cut this corner. We can do this thing that's immoral, but you know what? All that other stuff's not necessary. I know how to do this. I know how to run my life. And people make stupid decisions. They're simple ways because they love them. There's a natural tendency to us to love our foolishness, to love our laziness, to love our pride. And Proverbs comes right at that. Lady Wisdom shouts to us and says, how long are you going to keep doing that? I'll ask you that this morning. How long are you going to keep loving your simple ways? When are you going to open yourself up to wisdom? When are you going to turn your ear, store it up, call for it, search for it like treasure? She continues, how long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? People hate being taught sometimes. I don't mean by that they hate school. I mean, people hate to have their minds changed. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. You have to be kind of reprogram how you think about certain areas. And the Bible is one big book that is supposed to reprogram us. What did Paul say? Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. The renewing of your mind is when you stop hating knowledge, when you stop loving your simple, sinful ways and turn to God. So to seek for wisdom like treasure, we must be willing to accept wisdom's rebuke of our current condition. That's where it starts. This is why we have to be told to turn our ear toward it, even though she's shouting at us. She's shouting to us from the wall. We're walking by. We have to be told by Proverbs, turn your ear, store up what she says, call back to her, seek her out, go find her, because we have a tendency to walk away. And wisdom does rebuke us. Look at what she says. Repent at my rebuke. She's on the city wall. She's calling to us in the decisions we're making every day. And most of the decisions we make, we're locked in. We're not considering other options. This is our way of doing things. I've always done it this way. Even though the Bible sometimes says things and we're like, it seems like the Bible's telling me to do this a different way. It's okay. I love my foolishness. So she says, repent at my rebuke, then I will pour out my thoughts to you. I will make known to you my teachings. Do you want to know wisdom's teachings? I pray to God that you do. Let's pray. Lord, we ask for your blessings, for your wisdom. Pray you would inspire us by your Holy Spirit to seek wisdom for your son's sake. Amen.
It's time now to Pastor Lee as he leads us into communion.